Okay. So what are we going to do today? Well, I'm going to talk to you about some things that I don't have on the PowerPoint because they've come up recently regarding issues of the new contract forms. But we're going to let you know that if you are buyer's agent, you're submitting an offer, it better be on the new form. Do not mix and match. I've had lots of new contracts come in with the current addendum for sale of other property or a current addendum for mandatory membership. So please only use the current forms and all addenda if you're going to use the new one. And as I said, no listing agent is going to accept an offer today on the current form. They are all going to want the new form on something like that. I'm going to go through the list of the contracts that TREC has approved for mandatory use as of April 1st and the new addenda that we have. What does that mean? It means that if you have a receipted contract executed date of April 1st on the current form rather than the new one, you're in violation of TREC rules. We're never able to use a form that is not current. So be careful on something like that. I'll go through the listing agreement, just briefly show you what is mandatory for use for that form. If you have any questions, just take yourself off of mute and interrupt me. I'm not going to go into the chat room because it's got lots of other stuff rather than just what I'm doing. Then I'm going to go through the time limit. I've updated it to show the new provisions per the new contract form that we'll have as of April 1st. And then what do you do if you're a listing agent and you receive an offer on a repealed form? So we'll touch base because that's something you have to be aware of what you have to do on something like that. So TREC approved the unimproved property contract, 1 to 4 family residential contract, ranch contract, the condominium residential contract, new home contract, both incomplete and complete, and the short sale addendum, notice of buyer's termination of contract, and the addendum for property subject to mandatory membership in a property owners association. Then the 2 new addenda are also been provided. Now, what does this mean? This means that you're going to get rid of every template you've ever created and start over, because you don't want to ever use a form that is not current. And as of April 1st, you can't use any of the current forms that are going to be replaced. And these are all the ones that are being replaced. Now, the listing is mandatory use as of April 1st. And so what does that mean? It means that it won't be the first time your sellers see paragraph 2 in the contract. And that's very important for you as a listing agent because it is extremely important that you go through like a fine-tooth comb with paragraph 2 with your sellers, always. And so now they've got all the changes that were in the 1 to 4 family contract and others regarding paragraph 2. This is the paragraph that gives heartburn to listing agents and usually cause great disputes when the buyers do their final walkthroughs. So be very careful about that. If you look in improvements, you'd have to go through each and every one of these things with the sellers and get their acknowledgement and understanding of it. It's very clear. It says all the different things. It says security and fire detection equipment. Well, if you have a security system in your home and you don't own it, you can't convey it. And this contract paragraph 2B does convey it. So again, where would it go? It'd go in D, exclusions. Okay, anything that is not owned by the seller. There are those 2 new addenda, one of them regarding fixture leases, but make no mistake, if the seller is not able to pay for it in full, if they have a loan or a note, they are going to have to make sure that they do pay off anything that they have a note on versus a lease to own type of situation. So we've had lots of issues already come up on something like this. And so this paragraph takes a long time for a listing agent to go through with sellers, every detail of it so that they can get their understanding of it. Because again, it's going to be what they see on the contract.
Marilyn?
Mm-hmm.
Hi, this is Pauline. Is this bold at number B, at B? Is that bolded in the actual document, or did you just bold that for us to see?
No, it's always been like that.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure, because I know that with television antennas, you can have the kind that are installed permanently and the kind that are just pinned up to the wall.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
These are the things that you really, as I said, they cause so many issues, and these are things that can easily be avoided by making sure you're visiting with your sellers very closely on this. What was kind of interesting, a horrible side effect of that Arctic storm obviously was a landscape issue. And we had more sellers who refused to restore the shrubbery and landscaping. Well, that's what this contract is about. It has to be restored to the condition it was at time of contract for the seller. So there were lots of issues, but it always references back to this paragraph. So that's why it's so critical that listing agents really pay attention to this paragraph in great detail with their seller. So there's no surprises when the seller gets their offer, and the listing agent will go through that as well. Any questions? Okay. Now I'm going to go through the time limits. It's an Excel spreadsheet. What I'm going to show you today is the format for the time limit. Let's see. So here's what happens. It is our fiduciary duty in the course of the transaction, for if we represent sellers or buyers, to assist them by taking all of the time limits that there might be in the contract or any addenda and placing it to their notice. In other words, they have to see it. They don't have a way of knowing how to do this. They don't even know how to count the days. Heck, some agents don't know how to count the days, right? So that's your job to do that. So what this time limit does, it's been updated to provide a little bit more of the situations that might go on within the transaction. And so how would buyer's agents use it? Well, before the buyer would present their offer, you could play a pretend game and say, buyers, we're going to pretend that the sellers love your offer and they execute it tomorrow. So we're going to deal with a pretend effective date. And this is what it would look like. Do you feel and get with your lender that you can meet all these time limits? That's the first time. You can use this multiple times when people change terms, extend closing dates, all these different things. As listing agents, when your seller gets an offer, you're going to say, based on this offer, these are the time limits. If we didn't negotiate back, are these going to be something you can work with, or do we need to negotiate with them and counter them, those types of things. The biggest thing
Marilyn, where's this form?
Pardon me?
Where's this form?
The new one?
Yeah.
I provided it to
it should be in one of your emails, Cindy. I can also send it over to you right now too.
This is the PDF, the Excel spreadsheet. I will give it to Emily, and then she can upload it in the risk management documents where the others have always been. Okay. So what happens on this is we've got a situation where many times there's an action that needs to be done by the buyer. Some of these are hard-coded, they're found in our contract forms, and they're calculated. But one of them that's going to cause you an issue to have a calendar with you is when you talk about the option fee and earnest money. Remember that if that third day falls, you count every day in the calendar for option fee, but if that third day falls on a Saturday, Sunday, or legal holiday, it's due the next business day. And so this is what the computer will calculate based upon the contract forms. This field that says revised due by date, if applicable, is what you would have to manually enter based upon what in the event the third day falls on a Saturday or Sunday. And 3/14 was a Sunday. And so you had to go in there and say, this is the revised due date. It was due on that Monday. So again, you have to be very careful about how you take care of all of these dates in the contract that might have a little bit more of a moving part, such as the delivery of the earnest money and option fee. Now, what I did do is if the tenant occupied the property, seller must deliver documents by 3/14. It says if there are fixture leases, seller must deliver documents by 3/16. And if there are natural resource leases, seller must deliver documents by a certain date. Those are dates that in the event property is subject to them, that would be the dates that we'd have. Unfortunately for you, you will have to incorporate your own time limits in the event the property is subject to any of these. And the seller has maybe got a parameter that they have to work on for delivery of it, or the buyer is going to receive them and then the buyer gets an option to terminate within so many times. You're going to have to keep track of all those. That'll take a little bit more time on your part to make sure that that's done. The other thing is I broke it up in a little different language so that agents will see that third party has buyer approval, which is 2A. You put the number of days in that the parties agreed to, and then the third party notice for 2A due by a certain date. That is what the buyer would have to comply with in the event that they want to terminate because they didn't get individually approved or their terms in paragraph 1. But that could change if you amend it and extend it to a date as well. The third party property approval 2B, it's due 3 days prior to closing. So that's a calculation based upon the contract terms right now. So it is subject to the closing date. So if you change the closing date, that value could also change. The mandatory HOA number of days, and then if it's received by, and then who's going to provide them is a drop down, buyer, seller, or neither. Neither would be when one party must pay for them for the title company, but there's no provisions for a buyer to be able to terminate the contract and those types of things. Any questions? Okay, remember, take yourself off of mute and ask me. Okay. Now we're going to talk about what to do if you receive an offer on an outdated form. Well, outdated forms, or I reference them as repealed forms too. Both you cannot use an old, repealed, outdated TREC form or a Texas Realtors form. They're both subject to TREC violations. And my problem for you is if you did do all of this, you can't go back to the parties and say, I screwed up, because if they do, they can take your commission away for negligence and incompetence. That your duty is heavy at this point. You have to know what is the proper form and the current form to use in all the transactions. But as a listing agent, if you receive an offer, you're going to go to your seller and say, look, we got this offer. It is on a repealed form, an outdated form. I'm going to go back to them and ask them to resubmit on the current form. Now, most sellers are reasonable and understanding, but in the event the seller says, I don't care, you better put it in writing that they have, you urgently advise them to seek legal counsel if they want to use a repealed contract form. Okay, so that's what your job will be as a listing agent. Now, I'm going to point out a few things because we are having issues with the parties not understanding. Again, the use of this form is mandatory as of April 1st. So don't have any executed contracts on the current form as of April 1st. But let me talk to you a couple of areas that have come into serious questions here. Number 4, this is one of those provisions in the contract that says if you don't mark up property is not subject to it. Okay, and so it's left blank if the property is not subject to one of these. We have a lot of situations where there were not fixture leases, but the seller still owed a lot of money on a water softener. One of them owed a lot of money on the pool. And your seller cannot convey something they don't own. So what would have had to happen if they owed $50,000 on the pool still, that would have to come off of all of the balances that would be subtracted from their proceeds so that they could get to the bottom line net, what they could do. So again, it burdens you as the listing agent to make sure you go through this very clearly. When a buyer goes to a property and they see a pool, they're not thinking they're going to have a $50,000 note that they have to take over. Okay. Lots of issues that we've had in this market regarding that. Any questions?
Marilyn, regarding the pool, isn't the contract between the seller and the pool company?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Sorry, regarding the pool issue, let's say they're installing the pool, isn't the contract between the pool company and the seller?
What I'm going to tell you is if a seller still owes $50,000 on the pool in the backyard, they cannot sell that property without paying off that note at closing.
Okay, so then when we're filling this form, I'm representing the buyer, then the seller's agent should go back and fill up the space, because how do I know what the seller owes?
You won't. That's part of the problem. If the listing agent has failed to do their due diligence regarding all of the property and what is conveyed and not conveyed, or what has a note on it, it can present problems for a buyer. They've gone all the way through, paid lots of money to get the property inspected, paid monies to acquire the loan, and then all of a sudden the seller finds out, I can't sell this property. We have that happen way too much.
So how,
In that case, would the proceeds, would the seller have to pay off the pool with the proceeds?
Yes, that's what I'm saying. They're not going to get to closing unless they pay off all those notes. On the, you know, the equipment that they have installed, a water softener, and they owe $9,000 on it, a pool, all these things come into play. When a listing agent gets with the seller, they have to know, what do you have outstanding on anything that's affecting the conveyance of this property? As I said, it takes a long time. It's the exact same paragraph that's in the listing agreement. And that's one of the things I want to bring to your attention. We're having a lot of crazy things happen, but just because of the market we're in. Right. And so you need to kind of be aware of those situations. For a buyer's agent to ask the listing agent, well, did you do your job right? I don't know. I don't think you're going to be viewed as being cooperative on something like that. We're praying that they do their job right, but we never know. And we've had lots of situations where our own agents haven't done a very good job on something like that as well.
Marilyn,
Mhm.
are most of these, I don't know why we're having this back. Are most of these items like a pool, would that be a lien, a second lien on the house?
Correct. Mhm. Most
So it would
anybody
be
who does any
separate in title.
property. Yeah, but the problem is you need to cover that at the time of listing.
Got it.
Right? That's what you have to get cleared up, because the buyer's not going to ask you, did you do your job? They're expecting the seller to know if they can convey the property or not on those types of things. But everybody who's ever done work on your property, they file mechanics liens, vendor liens. And those usually come up. Sometimes we've had them come up a day before closing. It wasn't on the commitment, and then all of a sudden it pops up because there was a dispute with the people who had done work on the property before, and then they get all upset about those things. So again, it's very important to make sure you cover all of these, to dot every I and you cross every T.
Marilyn,
But we've
just
had a
as-
lot of issues on these.
just as an FYI, anytime anybody works on my house, I make them sign a release of lien.
Well, see, let me tell you, as a seller, I would have to make sure I had all the releases. I know who's worked on my property, right? So that's one of the things that the buyer's agent is thinking the seller's agent has done a really good job. They've already covered all of that. Next month, we're going to go through the listing agent best practices because we've just got too many elements that are coming into play right now with issues coming up, and we just need to revisit what is exactly what I need to be honing in on. A lot of it is this of the property. What is the property that's going to be conveyed? And we've had situations where release of liens were not done. The company is now out of business. There's nobody there to give the release of lien, even though the sellers can prove they paid it in full and notated on the check that they final payment. It's just, these are all situations that are coming up. And I think they get, in a market like we're involved in, it becomes a huge dispute issue. And that's what I'm trying to get to everybody to understand, that we need to do a much better job on something like this. Any other questions on paragraph 2? Okay, now we're going to get to paragraph 5. All right, here is what we've had issues with. The buyer agent hasn't read the contract form, but they're using the new one, but they just haven't read it. And unfortunately for them, they had the option before they're made out to the seller, when it clearly says in paragraph 5A that the escrow agent will receive the earnest money in this form and the option fee. So what do you do when you're in a situation like this? Well, let me explain what's happening right now. You'd probably have to get your seller to receipt it, because the title company is not going to touch a check with your seller's name on it. They're not. So once you receipt it, you'll send that receipt to title so they can account for it in the event that it closes in funds. Okay. The other thing I'm going to tell you is title companies don't care about the provisions in C and D. That's the seller's and the listing agent's job. What do I mean by that? It's 5 days after the time to receive the earnest money, and a title company is going to receive it. But it's clearly a seller's provision to tell the buyer, you don't have the unrestricted right to terminate because you didn't provide the option fee within the time required. You don't think that's not a big headache for you listing agents? It's a huge headache. Because basically, here's what has to happen. You have got to stay in touch with them until the provision for D and C have been met. When they're not met, the sellers will decide if they want to terminate because the buyer has not provided the earnest money for the contract. And the seller will have to give notice to the buyer if they fail to deliver the option fee within the terms of the contract. They will have to send a notice through you to tell the buyer, while we still have a contract, you do not have the unrestricted right to terminate for failure to deposit option fee per the contract. That's what you're going to have to do. Title companies are not going to do that. All they are doing right now is receipting things after the 3 days, and they think it's the sellers and the listing agent's problem on something like that.
So
Any questions?
you have to, the option fee has to be delivered to the title company, and then the title company sends it to the seller?
Well, then some title companies may hold it and will only disperse it in the event there's a closing. It'll be credited, or in the event there's a termination provision, they may send it to the seller. We don't know. You have to get that verification with every title company you will use.
So I don't understand, but the sellers, the title company, who signs for it?
The escrow agent, the title company.
So it's receipted from the title company, right?
Correct.
The option fee is receipted from the option fee is receipted from the title company, right?
Right.
So why are you acting like that?
So why am I what?
So we don't.
Well, here's the problem, Cindy. They receipt it 4 days after the executed date of contract. That doesn't give the buyer the unrestricted right to terminate. It has to be within 3 days of the effective date.
So that the title company receipts it. Is that correct?
And they're going to. They're not going to look in it, and they're not going to enforce the provisions of the contract. That is the listing agent and seller's job.
So once the title company receipts it, do we have the unrestricted right?
If you do it within the number of days in the
Okay,
contract.
got it.
Yeah, but they're not. It's 5 days after the executed date, and they've received the option fee and they've received earnest money. And no listing agent will ever let 3 days go by without verifying that the buyer has deposited the earnest money or the option fee if it's per the contract, because the seller has provisions that they have to communicate. They'll either terminate the contract if the earnest money is not at title, or they will say to the buyer, you do not have the unrestricted right to terminate for your failure to deposit the option fee. What the title company does with it, I have no idea. Receiving monies that are first applied to option fee and then earnest money, I don't know how they'll work that. You'll have to find out from every title company.
I have a question.
Do they still make out the option fee check to the seller?
No, it doesn't. It says right here very clearly, within 3 days after the effective date, firearm is delivered to the title company as escrow agent, and the earnest money and option fee shall be made payable to escrow agent.
All right, thank you.
Marilyn,
Uh-huh. But
Marilyn?
we've had a lot of agents.
Marilyn? Much feedback, sorry.
Everyone needs to mute.
can I ask you a question, Marilyn? Hello?
You can ask me a question.
Hey,
Yeah.
how about number 5A, number 1?
Mhm. You better have, as a buyer's agent, if your buyer is not going to deposit additional earnest money at time of offer and they know this, you better put in 0 here or NA and NA on the days. Do not leave it blank.
But if there is amount and number of days and they don't deliver, it's considered as right of termination for seller, right?
Yeah, it says paragraph C, failure to timely deliver earnest money, and that includes additional earnest money. But when you present an offer as a buyer's agent, if the buyer's not negotiating, putting down any additional earnest money at that time, please leave this, make sure it's 0 here and NA there. Do not leave this paragraph 1 blank.
Marilyn, quickly, so are you basically saying, depending on the title company that we're using, they're either going to hold the option money or give it to the seller, and that's just up to whichever title company we're using?
Yeah, the title companies we have, they said no, at this point, they're just going to hold it and they'll disperse it either as a credit to the buyer when the buyer closes, if that's what the contract, this contract form says, that they'll credit it. Or if the buyer has a right to terminate, they'll probably release it to the seller. But you've got to find that out. We don't know that.
Got it. Thanks.
Hey, Marilyn, it's Philip. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. No feedback. Great class. It's clarifying everything, but quick question. So in the deal is consummated, there's an execution date of the sale. The buyer's agent has to deliver the earnest money check and the option check to the title company within 3 days, correct?
Yes.
Now, but the listing agent's responsibility is to make sure that that occurs, correct?
Yes, for the seller. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the seller, for the seller. And then once it's delivered, will the title company notify the listing agent that it has been delivered, or does the listing agent have to hound the title company? Did you get it yet? Did you get it yet?
Well, we've had it both ways. We've had it where the listing agent had to request it because they didn't provide it. So, I don't know. I think I don't know how they work.
Okay. Two people
But it
involved.
has caused a major problem for listing agents when the title company receipts something outside of the time limits for C and D for a seller.
Sure.
Yeah, and I just wanted y'all to know to be a part of it. I'm going to tell you, one of your agents in your operation called me last week and they wanted to confirm all of this. And I've given great advice since December on this. As a buyer's agent, I would only have a cashier's check from my buyer. I would make sure it is receipted within the terms of the contract. And you can make those decisions and tell the buyer, you know, you're not going to use any of these alternative methods. We're going to get a cashier's check. You're going to get it to me so I can make sure that you deliver it per the terms of the contract. So you have the unrestricted right to terminate, and the seller will not hold you in default and terminate the contract. I think we really have to assert our best practices, knowing the best way for this to work, because it's become a nightmare for listing agents, and some of them that are, you know, pretty big teams that have a lot of activity. And I mean, they have got to, they're spending too much time verifying all of this with the title company. See, our current contract forms allow the listing agent to acknowledge the receipt of the option fee, or the seller, right? Well, we now know if they have a termination option. We don't have to call somebody. Well, now you're going to have to call somebody if you don't have the receipt. And the worst thing is the receipt has been coming in and they've receipted it and it's 5 days past the effective date. And it shows to me that the listing agent didn't uphold the contract terms for their seller and give their sellers the option if they wanted to hold the buyer in breach of the contract. So as I said, I just need you to really focus on, this has caused a lot of problems. It was created because there's agents that were having difficulty delivering the option fee to the listing agent for signature and receipt. And so this was the alternative. I was assured by the title companies, one of the biggest lobbyists there, don't worry, we know how to do this. We do it on commercial contracts. Well, feasibility period and option are totally different. They're not the same. And when it was revealed to us, they receipted all of these things outside of the termination option. And then the seller is the one who has to notify the buyer, you don't have the unrestricted right to terminate. You have contract, but you don't have the unrestricted right to terminate.
If the option fee started on, the option period started on Friday and Saturday and Sunday, that doesn't count?
Yes, you count Saturdays and Sundays.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm going to go back to the time limit. You count every day for options, right? But in the event that the third day falls on a Saturday, Sunday, or legal holiday, then it's due the next day. That's the element you have to pay attention to.
Marilyn, when you're accepting offers in that section 5.1, do we make sure that there's a number there or the NA like you said, or can we accept it with a blank?
You know, I just, as a buyer's agent, that is the most foolish thing you will do. Because I don't know about you, but there are people who would fill that in over your buyer's initials and signature. So I trust listing agents a little bit more from our operation, that they wouldn't complete something over someone's initials or signature. But as a buyer's agent, please don't leave them blank.
But as a listing agent, it's not my responsibility, so I could technically accept it as is.
Your seller could. It's just not good practice.
One more question. So let's say you said we can or we cannot use this form before the 1st.
No, I never said that. It's mandatory as of April 1st. We've had agents use it since February.
Okay.
Yeah, just don't mix and match the current addendum for mandatory membership in a properties association along with this new contract form.
Marilyn,
big change in that one.
Can you repeat again on the when you don't count Saturdays if it's a holiday on Monday?
If that third day
Oh, the third
It
day.
says within 3 days, within that third day. If that third day falls on a Saturday, Sunday, or legal holiday, it's the next day.
Okay, perfect. Thanks.
Any other questions? See, time is of the essence on this. Okay.
So even with it, if the holidays was on Saturday,
Pardon me?
I said, even if a holiday is on Saturday or Monday.
Yeah, it's only the third
would I-
day that you have to worry about.
Correct. So the best practice with having a best practice, even if I wanted to just even count that as a third day, try to have it there before, would that be a good practice to do just to make sure that my clients don't miss that third day?
Let me tell you, if I were representing a buyer, the minute we agreed to an executed contract, I would be at the title company that afternoon, later that morning, or the next business day that the title company is open. So yeah, we need to do a much better job for the buyers.
Okay.
Okay.
Marilyn,
Yes.
hey, I have a quick question. So if the third day fell, let's say this Friday is Good Friday, it's a holiday. And then Saturday and Sunday, they're not open. What happens then? Is it only due Monday, the next business day?
That's what it says. The next
Okay.
business day.
All right. All right. Thanks.
Yep.
Hey,
Next
Marilyn,
business day.
this is Genevieve. Can I say something real quick?
Mm-hmm.
For everybody out there, it's due on the third day. If that third day falls on a day when the title company is not open, it's the next day that title company is open, plain and simple.
And that's what and it's in the contract too. It's just we're having way too many issues with this. There should be no issue. If you've read the paragraph, it's pretty clear on each one of the provisions. That's why I'm pointing them out. And as a listing agent, I'm going to tell you, you are going to review how the buyer's agent is going to get the buyer's checks to title. Please do that, because I've had so many listing agents call me and they said, oh my gosh, the buyer agent had the buyer make out the option fee to the seller. Well, you know, I think you should have reviewed all of that since you're using the new form. There's nothing wrong with you to just review. Say, I'm so glad we've got an executed contract. Tell me when you are going to get the buyer's earnest money and option fee to title. Okay, so there's nothing wrong with you to kind of, until everybody figures out how to use this form, you should do that.
Marilyn, quick question though. So the first business day counts on the day that the offer is being executed, right?
All days in the contract and addenda begin the day after the effective date of the contract.
So if the contract accepts on a Wednesday, then Thursday counts the first day, not Wednesday.
Thursday is the first day, Friday is the second day, and the third day is Saturday. Well, title companies aren't open on Saturday, so it would be Monday.
Got it. Thank you.
Uh-huh. Any other questions?
Yeah, Marilyn, I have a quick question again, it's Philip. So we used to put down the escrow agent's name, but again, to clarify that, it's the title company who is the escrow agent, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
You are always required to put the escrow agent name. You're talking about the escrow officer, an individual.
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes.
Yeah, and we don't do that.
No.
It is at the escrow agent is the title company.
Thanks.
Any other questions?
Nope.
Okay. As I said, this has already caused a whole lot of problems, and we're not even a month into using the form. And so, as I said, I think the best way for buyer's agents is to really understand what your buyers have agreed to, knowing how difficult it is for them maybe to conduct a wire transfer and all this. Who didn't demand that transfer sent back. I mean, there's just lots of issues going on. And as I said, I always would want my buyer to put good funds. Good funds are cashier's checks, okay? They can put it in one check or they can put it in two. It doesn't matter. The title company is going to be the one that's going to receive. And if they put it in one check, they're going to take and apply the monies due to the option fee, if that's per the contract, and then to the earnest money, and then to any additional earnest money if it is also covered in the terms of the contract in paragraph 5. Any questions? Okay. So again, we're going to have to pay attention to this. It takes a long time. Your listing agreement is another one. If you have a template for that for the new one, it is dated 3/1/2021, but it's mandatory uses of April 1st on something like this. And now I'm gonna talk to you in general about what happens in markets like this. We get sellers who are upset, we get buyers who are upset, other brokers, you know, all these different situations. And I want to just present something to you so that you understand. When you're leaving, that's been brought to their attention, they're very respectful listening to the other party. While we may not think the other party's right, it doesn't matter. We're going to be very respectful, listening to what is it they are asking us to do, what they're complaining about that. And the reason for that is Trek's rules are very stringent on growth. With that later. But what happens on that when they're notified? You know, listen respectfully to the other party. And at the end of it, they say, you know, we take these things very seriously. We're going to get with the agent, and then after we do our investigation, we'll get back with you. What does that mean? That means that they're going to come to you, or I'm going to come to you and say, okay, explain to me what's going on, because we got this inquiry from this other party, right? So it's not so much that we're accusing you of anything. We just know that we heard their side of the story. Now we're going to hear your side. And oh, by the way, I know there are at least 3 sides to every story. And what I'm going to tell you is I've had, over the past few weeks, I've had so many agents say, oh, I'm going to send you all the text and emails. I said, don't bother. It is what the parties agreed to in writing that will prevail. And what I have found is that we have agents who trust what the other agent says. You have no binding authority as an agent for your client. You may be respectful, but you are never going to leave something not being placed in writing, contractually liable and responsible between the parties. That's just pure negligence on your part. Do not rely upon what they say. Sometimes the agent on the other side says, well, I'm very experienced and this is how we do it. And then you're going to say, well, I don't think that's how I was taught to use it nor explained, so I'm going to get some verification on it. You're not going to be rude to them, but you don't take their word. And oh, by the way, if you turn to them and tried to negotiate something with them when your buyer needed it in writing in an amendment, that's what you do. You treat your fiduciary with the highest regard and say, tell me what we need to put in writing and then present to the other party. And so once you do that, and the seller says, I'm not signing, well, at least you did your fiduciary duty for your buyer. You put it in writing and try to get the other party to agree. They're just not going to agree to it, and they don't have to. Nobody has to agree to anything once you have a signed contract. But my problem is that I think it's just that element of texting, emailing, and we've communicated this with the other agent. That's not a part of the contract. Neither agent has binding authority for their client. Do what you always need to do, acting as a fiduciary in the best interest of your client, is get it in writing so it will be contractually liable between the parties. And I think that's what the biggest issue is. You know, we take something very simple about the other agent saying, well, we'll get this cleaned up. If it's not a part of the contract, it's not binding. So again, just, it's not being disrespectful. It's actually doing what your fiduciary duty is for the client you represent. And for example, if you and the other agent do like to spend a lot of time going back and forth rather than first doing an amendment, the moment there's a consensus or reach an agreement of something, you better put it in writing immediately. Like, I don't mean in an hour, I mean immediately. When you get off of the phone or texting with the other party and they said, yeah, we'll do that, you get it in writing, signed by your client, and you get it over to the other party. That's where I find a lot of failures on the part of the transactions. I don't see in writing where one party asked the other party to do something and the other party agreed to do it. Any questions? No questions? Does anybody want to know what we're going to do next month?
Marilyn, before we go to next month,
Mm-hmm.
I have a question. I know it's not you that does this, but when will we get, should we expect to get a new IABS in .loop?
As soon as it is formalized and finalized with TREC.
Okay, so will we be notified that it's being changed then, or will it just show up?
We're going to hide it with all the other Easter eggs this weekend. Yeah.
Oh.
No, I may be the last to know. You might know way before me, but no, okay. They'll notify you, and they usually send it out as the template on something like this, and they provide it to Nicole so that she can populate it.
So if we're using the form as it is in .loop now, we're okay.
Yeah, as long as that's what's up on TREC, that's fine.
Thank you.
Will it be a red Easter egg?
You know, I don't think I had any red Easter eggs in this basket of 1,000 Easter eggs. That I even started hiding some yesterday from my grandson, and he was outside in this windstorm. I had the eggs rolling on the ground. The wind was so bad, and it was blowing everywhere. I hit it in a bush. It blew out of the bush and then down on the ground. So, but I don't have any red Easter eggs. That's kind of interesting.
Sticking with this,
Marilyn, I have a quick question.
Sorry.
Okay.
My question was, when we go into .loop, there's a like current file, and then there's like a buyer file. The buyer file will have all the current the ones that we're supposed to use. Is that right?
All the forms are updated, not only in .loop, which is version now. Now your templates, you're going to have to take care of, but it's in DocuSign as well as zip forms. So all the forms are all out there.
Okay, so let me rephrase that. I noticed that I didn't make the templates. There's like a buyer template, there's a seller template, there's a, I think you said new form or current now or something like that. Do you know if they've been segregated out, or do I need to go to that new current to find the actual new ones that the buyer and the seller templates aren't updated automatically?
If they provided the document in the template, it'll be the current one, and then once TREC does the same thing. TREC allows you to use the current one, and then they remove it on March 31st. It'll be removed, and only those documents.
You're calling about 8607 Stone.
The new documents
ma'am,
are already.
I'm calling about 93.
Okay, somebody needs to
Cindy.
Nelson.
Cindy, the new documents are already in .loop, Lisa.
Mm-hmm.
I was just asking which folder, because I know that there's a buyer folder, a seller folder.
The buyer folder has the current 1 to 4 family and HOA addendum and stuff already.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Just if you use templates and you've created your own, you get rid of them today. those kinds of things. Just get rid of them. It's
We
much
never
easier.
your personal templates never get updated. But the
No.
buyer, the listing, the tenant, and my lease listing, those are the market center templates. They get updated by Nicole Joyce and her team.
Any other questions? Okay, and so what are we going to do next month? Well, next month we are going to review in greater detail listing agents' best practices in light of the new forms and some other issues that have come up. And it's just, it's a good time for you to revisit with it. As I said, these new contract forms put a lot more responsibility on you to maintain and be constantly notified of things rather than being maybe the recipient firsthand on some of these things like the option fee. So we're going to go through those areas, as well as how do you handle certain situations that come up. A lot of these situations we have are recurring. You know what I'm saying, that they happen more than once. So there's a good way for you to kind of bypass having these disputes if you incorporate certain practices in handling listing transactions and the contract transactions.
Marilyn?
Any other?
Yes, I have a question to make sure I will do it correctly. I'm in a transaction now and representing buyers where we asked for several repairs in the property, and a lot of them was buyers' contractor's choice, but seller to be paying it. Everything in an amendment. But my question here is to make sure we will not have any lien in the property. For some reason, seller does not pay some of the companies. Is there a way I could put it in writing before the closing to protect my buyers for a future, I don't know, lien in the property, doing these unpaid repairs?
No, I think the buyer will need to verify all of these things. If they haven't placed a vendor's lien or mechanic's lien on the property because maybe the seller just had it completed a few days prior to closing, you're going to want to see all the paid receipts. That way you'll be confirmed that there is not a gotcha at the end that will come up and not be able to close because the seller has failed to pay those outstanding invoices.
Okay. Or maybe, yeah, check all the paid receipts and also maybe call all these vendors and make sure they were all paid and everything like this.
Yeah.
Right? Me as
You walk into a living nightmare when you have more than a few repairs on any contract. That's just a living nightmare, not only for the buyer's agent, but also for the listing agent. It truly is.
Yeah.
And we have a lot of properties right now that are in really bad condition. And because of the storm, and yet the sellers didn't want to complete them, and all these different situations that are coming up. But I'm just going to tell you, and Chuck will verify this and any other coach, when you have pages of repairs, treatments, replacements, it's a nightmare for the agents in the transaction.
Yeah.
It just is.
Yeah, yeah, okay. I was like wondering if I could, in some point, have a document, I don't know, inside the contract, I don't know if I have time for it, to make sure any lien will be transferred to the new buyers.
You're going to get title to help you on that as well.
Okay, I
Because
can.
they want everything paid.
Okay, I can ask to title. I can reach out and say, look, I want to make sure we are free or nothing pending. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, I think.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Well, I wish you all a very blessed holy day and holiday coming up. Please take care. Don't throw all the caution to the wind. We're still in this, so please make sure that you stay safe and well, and make sure that those that you represent are following the good protocols that we put in place a long time ago. All right, everybody, y'all take care.
You too, Marilyn. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Marilyn. Bye, everyone. Have a great day.
Marilyn.